Okay, hey, it's time to get Billsy again. It's an immediate follow up to my Joe Brady announced as a head coach video. Literally the second that video posted, at the end, I'd kind of mentioned I'd be really curious to see who the coordinators would be on Brady's staff. And as soon as I posted that video, it comes out that former Bills defensive back Jim Leonhard is the front runner to be the DC in Buffalo, which blew my mind. While I was not immediately in love with the Joe Brady hire, I felt like it was important to see who his coordinators would be, um, to really get a good say of if this makes sense or not. And I love the Jim Leonhard idea at DC. So last week after McDermott got fired, one of the first things I started digging into were defensive coordinators who would be available, not necessarily for the head coaching position, but for the DC position in Buffalo. And when I came across Jim Leonhard and really dug into his scheme, I didn't think he would be a good fit given how the Bills' current personnel, and they've always been very nickel or 4-3 based. Um, and he runs a hybrid 3-4 that sometimes turns into a 5-2. And so that's pretty different in terms of personnel and philosophy from what we've had. And, a lot of those guys are still locked up in contracts. Greg Rousseau, Terrell Bernard, Cole Bishop, Deion Walker, TJ Sanders. So there's a lot of guys that are locked up for at least multiple years that some may or may not fit such a system. Especially, I'm really curious how Greg Rousseau might fit in this, if this is the route they go. But as a player, I loved Jim Leonhard. He played for the Bills in the mid 2000s, then bounced around a little bit between the Jets and the Ravens, if my memory serves me right, then came back to the Bills. Essentially, once he left the Bills, he went wherever Rex Ryan went, or one of Rex Ryan's kind of, I don't want to say flunkies because that's not right, but Mike Patine, who was a Bills D coordinator and then went on to be the head coach of the Browns. And both those guys ran a very similar 3-4 system. And so wherever those guys went, Jim Leonhard was sure to follow, and Jim followed when Mike came to the Bills as the D coordinator in 2013. Jim came with him, and then when Mike left to coach the Browns, Jim went with him, and that was the end of his career. But a guy I really like, very undersized. He was about 5'8", about a buck 90, not the fastest guy. Ran a 4.6 plus at the combine, but played fast, played hard, played tough, made great tackles. And the great thing about a guy like him is usually the best athletes don't make the best coaches. It's the flip. It's the guys who are undersized and don't have that natural athletic ability because they have to really understand the game to be successful and play at a level like that. I mean, Jim Leonhard was in the league for 10 years. And that's not something you see typically with a 5 foot, 890 pound, slow defensive back. But he was able to make it work by his brains. So that's why a guy like that makes a great coach. He utilizes a 3-4 base, and frequently switches that into a 5-man, which, if you followed the Bills the last few years in McDermott, you would think a 5-man D line was illegal because it never happened, even when it would make sense. He also runs what's known as a peso defense, which is essentially when you go out of the 3-4, you're taking out one of those down linemen, and now you have two of those down linemen, the two outside linebackers or edge. So now you have those four, and you replace that down lineman with another defensive back. So now instead of taking out a linebacker, you have two linebackers. You take out a defensive lineman, put in another defensive back. So you have four linemen, two linebackers, and five DBs. So he runs kind of a hybrid mix from that 3-4, which I think is awesome. It's much more attack oriented than what we've seen, which would be a real wake up call for us Bills fans to be able to see something like that. Now, I think one of the things we need to keep in mind is that he was also the defensive coordinator at University of Wisconsin and ran one of the best defenses for a number of years. I took some notes, and again, going back to last week when I started putting these notes together for Jim Leonhard, I didn't really think he would be the guy, but as stunned as I was about Joe Brady getting the head coaching position and maybe not so thrilled about it, I'm equally stunned and thrilled that Jim Leonhard looks like he's going to be the D coordinator for us. at Wisconsin in 2017 when he took over as D coordinator. They were number one in total defense. 2018, 41st, had a little dip there, but in 19, 8th place in the country. 2020, 5th place. In 2021, he really lit it up. Number one in the country for yards per play, number four in defense and scoring with only 16 points per game against, number three in defense and third down percentage, which is amazing, and number one in rushing first downs allowed. I mean, that's absolutely unbelievable. Number one overall in first downs allowed in 2022 was 10th. Now, he then went from there to coach with the Broncos. And in 2024, when he's not the D coordinator, Vance Joseph is, but he's the pass game coordinator for the defense. Okay, and think about Patrick Surtain became the defensive player of the year under Vance Joseph, under Sean Payton, and under Jim Leonhard's tutelage. He had the seventh best opponent passer rating, seventh lowest yards per attempt, even though they gave up the 12th most passing yards per game, but they had the fifth most attempts against. So really impressive there. All vast improvements. 2025, this past season, fifth best opponent passer rating, ninth fewest passing yards per game on the sixth most attempts against, second best yards per attempt behind only Seattle, and we saw what Seattle was able to do, making it all the way to the Super Bowl, and 10th fewest passing first downs per game. So this is wildly awesome for Bills fans. I mean, his system is known for being adaptable to the personnel, emphasizing player intelligence, and really understanding pre-snap what's going to happen. And that makes sense because for a guy like Jim Leonhard, again, to make it as long as he did, he had to know ahead of time what the hell was going to be happening on that field to be able to make the plays that he did. He relies heavily on simulated pressures through creepers. And what creepers are, where you'll see it'll look like the lineman's going to pressure the quarterback, he drops into coverage, but instead the linebackers, the inside linebackers, or a safety or a corner, they blitz instead. We saw actually a little bit of that in the Bills game for the Bills, quite frankly. That's how Deion Walker got his interception. But they have typically will only have four rushers and seven guys back, but they attack from just random angles, unexpected angles, which really confuses the offensive line and, of course, the quarterback. And now they also play a middle of the field close. So a cover one or cover three will have one deep high safety who I think could probably be a Cole Bishop. No, though Cole Bishop's really good at playing in the box as well. So I'd be curious to see how they utilize him. But they utilize a single high safety to help support the run. And every once in a while mix in a two high safety look to disguise coverages. But I think this is wherever they put Cole Bishop, he could flourish because he's great at coming off the edge and being a blitzer, but he's also a thumper in there too for the run game, and he can make plays if he is that single high safety as well. So this is huge news, great stuff. It's already making me like this Joe Brady situation a little more than I originally thought. Now I'll be really curious to see what comes about with the offensive side of the ball. So let's keep things positive here. Again, the initial shock of Joe Brady was very surprising, but this is a step in the right direction. So we're going to see a little more attack-oriented defense, which is certainly what we've been asking for years. So, you know what I say to that? Go Bills.